It's good to see it's such an international audience. We have countries from Europe all the way over to North America, South America. So it's good to see such an international language teaching community. So, and thank you, and Donna from North Wales. So perfect, excellent. So what we're going to be covering in this session. So we're going to be looking at translanguaging, basically what the session is going to be all about. We're going to look at what it looks like. We want to look at how it's developed in academic thought, so just have some kind of, academic context, and we'll see how it applies to the EAL context, because we want to know how translanguaging could work for an EAL learner. We'll think about what is the role of translation in the classroom. So thinking about the best practices regarding translation and addressing the burden of translation, not just from a learner perspective, but also from a teacher perspective. And we'll also be looking at how translanguaging can be implemented. So looking at specific techniques we can use in the classroom and outside of it, and what resources are available from Twinkl and beyond. So hopefully you're all ready for a good session about translanguaging. A little bit about me before we get stuck in. I'm a content writer and editor for the EAL team here at Twinkl. And I'm also a speaker of English and Spanish. English is my first language and Spanish is my second language. And I'm from Manchester. So those are my credentials. I'm mostly focused on secondary teaching, English literature and English language, GCSE, which is a qualification for high school students here in the UK. So all good. So the multilingual context. So we're with lots of international people, but we're focusing a little bit on the UK because that's where my area of expertise is from, but probably in a lot of countries such as Canada, there will be a big multilingual context there as well. So it's clear that the UK is becoming increasingly diverse linguistically and culturally. The reaction from some teachers when they have this multilingual context is to see it as a deficiency rather than a benefit. One approach to closing the gap in linguistic capability is to shift focus onto student needs rather than a perceived lack of linguistic ability from the teacher or the student. Because I know a lot of the times teachers will think, I have a EL learner or I have a multilingual learner that has a language that I don't speak or I'm not very proficient in, and there's a tendency to shy away from that, to kind of ignore it, leave it to the side. But we'll have a look at today at how we can be more confident in bringing that language into the classroom, or being more comfortable allowing that language to shine during classroom contexts. A little bit more about the UK context as a whole. Studies conducted in classrooms in England suggest that due to a lack of clear national policy towards multilingualism, many multilingual students are not supported, and the potential benefits of their bilingualism are not exploited. Others have suggested that a monolingual approach that restricts home language use is a barrier to better well-being and a positive experience for multilingual learners. So we need to make sure that we're not gating off this potential benefit or impacting students negatively. However, as with most things in the education systems in a lot of schools, the burden falls on individual school communities to promote or normalize multilingualism in the classroom and outside it. So that's what the multilingual context is in the UK and perhaps in other countries. We want to acknowledge this and try to link this to our translanguaging approach. So I want to know a little bit more about your context. You've shared where you live, where you've come from, but I want to know a little bit more about your teaching. So I want you to share in the chat, what are the languages other than English or Welsh, if you're from Wales, that your learners speak? So what home languages do they have? What other languages besides the proficient language in your school do they speak? Sound off in the chat, and I just want to have a quick look. Are there many languages, but they're singular speakers? Do you have languages that are shared across classes or year groups? How do you compare to other schools in your local area? Let me know in the chat. Okay, thank you, Amy. So quite a mix there already. Wow. 27 different languages, yeah. You don't need to list all of them off, but yeah. Wow, a very good mix. 27 languages, biggest groups are Polish, Romania. Okay, thank you, Dagmara. Tracy, 30 languages, wow. Ukrainian, Russian, Portuguese, Chinese, Mandarin. That's good, teacher. Yeah, in Canada, yeah. Albanian, Russian, Polish, Farsi, Urdu, Spanish, wow, okay. Welsh, English, and Polish, yeah. Urdu, Punjabi, Pashto, 41 languages overall, wow. Groups are Polish and Malayan. Wow. Okay, excellent. So as you can see, just from this very quick survey of who we have in in our international TeachMeet today, the language context is very diverse, and it's excellent to know that in different countries, there's multilingual context. So thanks for sharing that in the chat for me. It's very interesting to know and very important to help the support be more focused on that. Italian also good. Have a look at the national context. So comparing to the national context of languages in general, we can see that there might be some alignment. So I noticed someone mentioned about having majority groups of Romanian home language speakers, for example, but there might be some differences. So for example, many schools in the UK may have Ukrainian speakers, even if they do not represent a majority in overall statistics, for example, in the national census in 2021. Yeah. So we just have to take that into account, that each individual school and each individual school community can have diverse contexts, as you all pointed out. But that's a little bit about the national context. There's over, I think, there was 99 plus languages recorded in the national census in England. And I don't even think the census captures that amount of linguistic diversity. So we'll have a look then at how this connects to translanguaging. Where does translanguaging fit into this lovely multilingual context? So earlier in academic thought, researchers like Paradis believed multilingual speakers developed knowledge or memory in separate systems. So they believed that you had a English side or a Spanish side or an English section and a Spanish section, and language took from two separate systems or two separate bins, shall we say. However, today, thanks to the evolution in thought and theory, the general consensus is that knowledge, memory, and language development are part of one whole linguistic repertoire. So a student's memory bank or knowledge base can therefore be used by both the home language and the target language, which allows for this idea of translanguaging. This idea was developed by Garcia and others, and translanguaging has become a kind of umbrella term for all things multilingualism. The two kind of main important labels that we'll take care of during this session is spontaneous translanguaging. This refers to unplanned and usually student-led language use. So perhaps code switching, perhaps using things like Spanglish and other things like that. So it's an ad hoc basis use of home language and target language. On the other hand, we have pedagogical translanguaging, which is planned or embedded in the learning environment by a teacher. So this is targeted use of multilingualism. So I hope that makes sense, this kind of transition from thinking of language as singular in separate places to one whole linguistic repertoire. All good. So to simplify for this session, I want you to think about translanguaging as fostering a positive multilingual environment. So this would be achieved through encouraging the use of home languages that support communication, understanding, and target languaging, and helping multilingual learners feel proud of their language skills. There's a lot of depth there to go into, both theoretical and practical. So if you would like a more detailed look at experiences with translanguaging and the differences between pedagogical and spontaneous translanguaging, there's a brilliant podcast with Helen, who's here today, and guest speaker Jacob Huckle. It's an excellent listen regarding translanguaging and what the different things are under that umbrella. You may also be thinking right now that translanguaging sounds a lot like the concept of multilingualism as a whole, but you just need to remember the key difference. Translanguaging is a linguistic system in which multilingualism can operate with. We recently had an excellent deep dive into multilingualism and how you can implement a multilingual strategy in your learning environment with Dr. Sabine Little. You can have a quick read up on our website as well. The links will be on the PowerPoint after the session, so don't worry about rushing to write anything down or rushing for any links. It'll all be there in the PowerPoint, which will be sent afterwards, so all good. So that's translanguaging. We've defined it, we've looked at the journey. Let's have a bit of a quick look. So here's an example of translanguaging in action. In this example, Manuel, Eleanor, and Javier are learners of EAL discussing the Great Fire of London with their classroom TA. They are all Spanish speakers. What do you notice about the languages being used in this transcript? Let me know, what do you think? How is language being used to communicate, to learn? What do you think? Yeah, in a mixed language, Korean, yeah. How do you think the TA is using language in this instance? What do you think? Typical for bilinguals, yeah, I would agree. Picking out keywords, good. Confirming keywords, excellent, Amy. Good. Excellent. That's basically what I wanted to point out here is that the language production by Javier, Elena, Emmanuel. Yeah, exactly. Tinkara. This whole idea of code switching or how much meaning is being taken out of that or what are they building on? Yeah, exactly. But in general, the language production by Javier, Elena, and Manuel, it's not impeded by solely speaking in English. And the TA is receptive to the use of two languages by using things like redirection and clarification. For example, the TA clarifies the words panaderia and madera as bakery and wood. So the students are able to use their prior knowledge that may have been developed in Spanish and apply it flexibly to a question asked in English. So perfect, excellent. I'm glad people are able to spot that already, this translanguaging in action. Perfect. So I know a lot of classes, there may be only one multilingual speaker, or there might be only one EAL learner. So it's a bit difficult to really target a home language. But I want us to think about it as well in a monolingual sense. So I believe this concept could be applied to monolingual speakers when we look at language as a form of system or of a system of expression. In subjects such as English and history, monolingual speakers need to be taught how to think and write academically. I still went to university and I still had to learn how to present an essay, how to present my points in a succinct way and in an academically acceptable way. So that's the same for highly proficient speakers as well. So when discussing English literature on an ad hoc basis with students, I found that, like the previous transcript, I was redirecting and clarifying student knowledge to a more academic expression. So, for example, students may know that Macbeth is an ambitious character. They may even have a quote to support that. Their input is informal English or incomplete ideas. We have a processing step, which would be transferring this idea or informal English into academic English. And then finally, the output, which is formal or academic English. So Macbeth is shown to be ambitious when saying blah, because. So that's a way to think about it, even as a monolingual learner or a monolingual speaker, how that processing and translanguaging can apply. This works the same when we're thinking about a multilingual speaker. So prior knowledge, such as character descriptions, historical events, and definitions, are being processed and presented in a complex process. The same technique we would use in a monolingual class, like word banks and scaffolding, can perfectly help multilingual EAL learners too. So things like reminding EAL learners about what question words are, asking them to do, what they ask these question words to do, what their their purpose is, what do they need to interrogate or properly answer this question. It can help them apply their multilingual knowledge and push it in the right direction rather than getting confused or muddled regarding what this idea is. A range of scaffolding resources like our English literature packs can help build knowledge from the ground up. So giving them space to explore linguistically while also keeping the knowledge clear. I hope that makes sense. So moving that processing into English. So for new arrivals, so you may have new arrivals that have, they've done 9 years of schooling in their home country, and they've just now been transferred into your country's education system. Students use what they already know as a reference point for future learning. For a new arrival to your school, especially at higher levels I've seen, this might mean they know a lot more than a standardized assessment may suggest. So they may fall into the trap of their prior knowledge being in Spanish, they have a standardized or an entrance test in English, and the result can be a little bit inaccurate. We don't have the knowledge unlocked yet. Ways we can deal with that is thinking about the prior knowledge, clarifying with multilingual resources or translanguaging, sitting the standardized or entrance test, and the result will therefore be more accurate. They would have been able to unlock their knowledge in their other language into English through this clarifying process before or during the test. So that's a way that translanguaging can help new arrivals. Tools like speaker pens, dictionaries, multilingual glossaries can unlock this knowledge. Are there any tools or strategies that the people in this call use for new arrivals that I've not mentioned? Is there anything that's been particularly effective? TPR, good. Thank you, Dagmara. And good to know that those dual language resources are going to well. Google Translate, yeah, sometimes with Arabic. We know Korean, these translation software aren't perfect, but it helps us get there. Yeah. A lot of support from TAs. Yeah, TAs are a godsend in these situations. They really help to open communication. Images, yeah, visual representation, perfect. Live translate PowerPoint, yeah, lots of pictures, yeah. So good. So lots of things that I'm going to mention, like translation, visual representation. So good. We're already well on track to enabling translanguaging. Perfect. Widget pictures, good. Thank you, Sherilyn. Perfect. So TPR image, yeah. Good. Perfect. So let's have a look what it looks like for planning. So yeah, exactly, Twinkl symbols. It's a very flexible resource, yeah. So we have a look then at planning. So at pre-teach, we know we want to support EL learners or multilingual learners just before teaching. So they have the content, kind of looked at, the context is understood. So we would pre-teach in English or Spanish, for example. That would be a perfect way to introduce a new concept. The lesson content would then be in English with translanguaging encouraged, and then the understanding has been built in both their home language and the target language. So we can apply that to lessons in general. We can help clarify concepts and build vocabulary in this pre-teaching period, and then develop the subject knowledge in English and in their home language. So for example, the provision of multilingual glossaries can help multilingual learners explore the topic and reinforce understanding. So in our curriculum scaffolding packs, we took care to help learners understand key vocabulary through both visual representations, as you mentioned in the chat, and opportunities for multilingual expressions like these glossaries. So we're really building that exploration of language, which translanguaging requires. Another concept to help enable translanguaging is thinking about your instructional routines. So the simple think, pair, share can really be adapted to enable it by adding any language in the think step, allowing for home language use in the pair section, obviously, if a language buddy is available. And then a final clarification step before sharing means all language resources are exploited. So it's a simple concept that we can think about, these instructional routines. So it would be a Herculean task to provide translations for all material in home languages of all of our different students. As we mentioned at the start, we have such a diverse range of languages in our learning settings, and especially in language-rich subjects like history, geography. We don't want to place a burden of extra cognitive load on the teacher or on the EAL learner when it could be avoided or eased. Dual language resources, which people mentioned in the chat for things like key texts and concepts, can enable a multilingual learner to engage with the topic and to build a solid foundation. Where translation may not be possible due to time or linguistic restraints, vocabulary should be kept short and simple to ease cognitive load on an EL learner. We should also think about if the learner can read or write in their home language. Especially for younger learners, they may not have developed reading or writing skills. So if they can't, translations won't be useful in most cases. The topic or vocabulary might even be hard to understand in their home language. Maybe they don't even have that prior knowledge that they can access with translanguaging or translations. If they haven't got that, then translation might not be the best option either. So instead, we should focus then on scaffolded approaches. We have some excellent ideas regarding when to use home languages in the classroom. On this slide on the right there, there's a document that you can have a read through to learn when we should be using translations. And on the left, we have an example of high frequency words, which has been translated into Ukrainian with English on the side that may help a younger learner to pick up vocabulary faster. But let's have a look at then these scaffolded approaches, things that we use instead of translation. So we can break down concepts. We can get these complex concepts and break them down into manageable chunks with visuals and concept maps. So on the left here, we have a definition card, a flashcard, which has the keyword, the definition in English, and a key visual representation that really helps to get a connection to the words. Concept maps, similar idea. They really break down ideas into clear, succinct information that can be understood by a multilingual learner. So we should focus on effective visual support. So seeing vocabulary in context and providing visual support for those words. The student needs to see definitions or its use in a sentence to create meaning and connect it to visual memory. We can also help reduce the burden of translation when asking learners to produce language or produce the target language. The use of scaffolding and writing frames and graphic organizers can help keep translation focused and with a clear target. So we have analyzing a poetry graphic organizer. I know highly proficient speakers that still struggle with this. So having a graphic organizer really helps to target language and stuff like that. On the opposite hand, on the right there, we have a whole translanguaging template pack that really delves into the different ways that we can organize knowledge visually to really help multilingual learners ideate and understand whether in their home language or their target language. Part and parcel of this is the impact a positive multilingual environment can have on all students in the classroom, not just multilingual students. A restrictive monolingual environment denies the chance for self-expression and development inside and outside the classroom. To reject a child's language in the school, as Jim Cummins put it in 2001, is to reject the child as a whole. We can foster a positive multilingual environment through diversity in literature studied in class. This can help broaden responses to multilingualism. Opportunities for everyone in class to engage in multilingualism through things like a multilingual library can show a material reality of linguistic diversity. Multilingual role models like famous writers can help improve opinion of multilingualism and provide a new point of view, both for monolingual speakers and multilingual learners. Displaying of home languages can also help normalize a diverse linguistic environment. My favorite resource there on the right is these fact files about famous multilingual writers and focusing a lot on poetry. I think that's an excellent way to start to introduce multilingualism and give some role models for all the students in your class. And of course, as I'm partial to English literature, I really do think that poetry can be a brilliant starting point for discovering self-identity and can also help students learn other cultures and give the same respect to their own culture. So for example, we have a writing a multilingual poem teaching pack resource here. And this goes through both the structure needed to write a poem, the different formats of poems, and also how we can introduce multilingualism through poetry writing. So if you have some time, have a read through that, and maybe that will be something that you can input for your next National Poetry Day or Poetry Week at school. And now, finally, onto outside the classroom. So both home languages and target languages are being developed outside of school. We know this. People speak outside of the classroom. So open-ended home learning tasks, for example, are an excellent way to help EAL learners explore new language contexts outside of the classroom. Spontaneous translanguaging, or spontaneous languaging in general, can be an exploitable tool. And we can exploit this by engaging parents and carers in learning and communicating. So they can reinforce or become an excellent gateway to learning home languages and the specific cultural context surrounding them. But we just need to remember that there might be pushback from parents or carers. They might have the idea that English should be spoken at home based on the idea that a home language might deter English language learning. We should therefore reiterate to parents, carers, and other people in our language or learning community that there's benefits to multilingualism or home languages. We need to talk about the benefits to identity, culture, keeping up family history on the one hand, and on the other hand, the use of speaking multiple language or how one language helps the learning of the other. So locking in that multilingualism or bilingualism. We have some excellent resources here which will help you engage with parents and carers who might be new to English, and also some translated statements there. Signposting home language learning opportunities like complementary or community schools. So you might have only one Romanian, or you might have only one Pashto, or you might only have one Spanish-speaking student in your school. Complementary schools allow for language exploration. You should check your local authority websites if you're in the UK for more information on local schools or activities which can link your learner to these new opportunities. So for example, in Manchester, where I'm from, we have the Manchester Supplementary Schools Partnership, and in London, we have the St. Mary's Ukrainian School. Just a quote there from a study that the Polish complementary schools have really helped to develop friends and family more easily, and also to keep a wider sense of community with multilingual speakers. So a bit of a rusher there at the end, but basically, conclusion. We've looked at the development of translanguaging as a concept over time and applied it directly to the EAL context. We can understand that translanguaging is a shared system of communication with multiple languages. We went through some ideas regarding how we can enable translanguaging inside and outside the classroom so students can exploit their language repertoire. And we've understood that translation is a tool that we use sparingly, but we should try to use other scaffolds and strategies first. And obviously, hopefully we've opened a dialogue on how language learning communities can embrace the challenges of their multilingual context. So that's about it for me. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the class, in the chat. But that's all for me.